What's up, y'all? Your girl G here, just drinking a little tea here. Okay, well, that kind of rhymes. Your girl G here, just drinking a little tea here. Yeah, what's up? Your girl G here. Hey, what you doing? Welcome back to my channel. Appreciate you for tuning in. I was just sitting here drinking a little bit of tea. I got this, well, I actually kind of combined two teas. I put my stress ease tea and then my smooth move tea together. And it's gonna make a little bit of a magic happen, okay? One of the smooth move is for intestinal gut health, because I am unfortunately somebody who suffers from IBS. I know I ain't the only one who out here with gastro issues. So every now and again, you know, you gotta flush the system, okay? We getting old. I'm 30 years old, so I gotta, you know, start trying to be healthy, y'all. And one of the things that people definitely undermine or underestimate is gut health, okay? That really plays a huge part in a lot of things, and a lot of people don't know that. But nonetheless, I'm drinking this tea, so most likely by the end of this review, you know, some things should make it happen. All right, but let's go ahead and get into Married to Medicine. This is the part 2. I need to hurry up and do it because I know I'm behind, y'all. I know I'm a little bit behind, and so I want to go ahead and hurry up and knock this out. Okay, so pick up where we left off. But hold up, pause. Make sure you like the video. Make sure you don't come over here and not drop a like and the motherfucking collection plate. What the? I hate when it's like that goddamn like a gnat or something that just will not leave you alone. Oh, it's because I got my tea. That's what it is. My tea is honey. One of them is like a honey turmeric chai type situation. And so I'm sure what this gnat that's flying around is like smelling the honey from my tea. But let's go ahead and get into the review. Like I said, just make sure you like the goddamn video. All right. So, we open up with where we left off. Contessa and Heavenly, because y'all know Heavenly got a mouth on her. And, you know, Contessa was on the receiving end of it, and they were discussing that. Contessa, you know, decided to go back her about Damon and potentially the mixed baby. See, I thought the mixed baby situation was the son, okay? I didn't think it was about Damon. But nonetheless, you know, we gotta get right back into the same topic of Heavenly and this goddamn, you know, social media. And so Simone basically broke it down, obviously, and saying, you know, Heavenly, Contessa thought you were a really close friend of yours, or a close friend of hers, because at that point before Jackie started crying, it's just so sad because they really were good friends. And then Heavenly after that, because Heavenly before that said, girl, quit talking to me with your lopsided titties. And of course everybody was like, damn, Heavenly, because Contessa had I think she said a mastectomy or something like that. So y'all know Heavenly just fly off like the mouth. She ain't thinking about, you know, the root of issues or whatever. So her saying that and caused Jackie to cry with the bull, talking about y'all just used to be such good friends. And so Simone basically clarifies, like, girl, Contessa, like, y'all are really good friends. So the things, whatever it may be, she's telling you behind the scenes, you don't go on social media and then just kind of like gratify it. And that's something I've said constantly since the beginning of like their beef when it happened. Heavenly did the same shit to Simone. Heavenly will justify saying some stuff that she knows, because behind the scenes she is having conversations with these women, and she'll use, well, you on the show or whatever, like, I'm talking about the show. Yeah, you might have been talking about the show and what happened on it, but to answer questions, if you call yourself Contessa's friend, to answer questions of like, do you think her husband, you know, is abusive? And you like, yep, sure do. Contessa as a friend is going to feel a certain type of way. Because especially with the fact that y'all are talking behind scenes. And so us as the public, we're only getting obviously what we see recorded on the show. But it just makes it a lot more valid and almost kind of gives the public like a little bit of, you know, validation, because we know that you and Contessa were really good friends. So yeah, but Heavenly's gonna, I done apologize. I don't know what else you want from me, Simone. Oh my God, like, I done apologize, so you bring it back up. Like, I don't know what you want me to do. And so Andy, of course, is like, well, you know, Heavenly, yeah, you apologize, but this is season 10, and we are still talking about you on social media and the disaster that you are. And Heavenly whoa, sarcastic ass. Well, Heavenly, no, she said, Andy, do you want me to stop with the social media? She knew what she was doing, because everybody knows when it comes to Married to Medicine, Heavenly really does a lot of the pushing and the promoting through these lives. So she wanted to try and like divert it to her doing the lives versus paying attention to the shit that you're saying on the lives. Nobody's caring that you're doing the lives. But then Andy, you can't sit there and be like getting on her, but then like kind of like backpedal when she's like, he was like, well, I mean, I don't care, but if you were talking shit about me, like, then I would, and then I definitely have a problem with it. So it's like, you see that Heavenly be talking mess about these girls, and then you cool with it. It's just like, well, as long as you ain't talking mess about me, like, god dang. So Heavenly, yeah, was being very sarcastic when she did that. Andy, would you like me to stop the lives on social media? Because we know, Heavenly girl. So, yeah, after that, we move on to Sweet Tea segment. You know, she's back. Her and Gregg are trying to, you know, do the baby making. Then she's trying to make fetch happen with age gap dating. Girl, age gap dating has literally been here since the inception of Adam and Eve. Since the beginning, men have been dating girls 13 years old and their ass has been 30. Okay, so age gap dating, you're not creating a new phenomenon. But I get it. You trying to, you know, trademark or whatever your deal is. So she's got they call it the sweet and savory speed dating, which ironically nobody discussed how sweet and savory was something that Quad previously had. But of course they do the playback and everything like that. Andy asked Sweet Tea, you know, what's going on with the fertility, or is there any news? She said that she started with IUI, but the first they did 2 rounds and they failed. So now they're gonna go through streams of IVF. And of course, with you know, Simone, she spoke up and basically was talking about, you know, the time limit that Gregg gave Sweet Tea. Basically, he was like, you know, 2 years. And in Sweet Tea's mind, of course, that's kind of like short, because at the end of the day, you pregnant 9 months. So like that's the half the year, you know. So you know, Simone kind of of course, as a medical doctor, backed that up in the essence of like, Gregory ain't trying to be 80 years old at a graduation. And of course, Sweet Tea understood that too. And so it's like they got to get on it, unfortunately, which is kind of another stressor that she has. But it's like, if you ain't getting pregnant, girl, maybe there's a reason. You know, maybe there's a reason, okay? And so Andy gives her what you call it, social media question, and basically was like, oh, you know, Sweet Tea, what are 3 tips to get a old rich husband or whatever? She ain't necessarily answered the question. She basically was just like, you know, we all deserve love and support and protection. And Toya was like, shoot, well, you know, I agree with that. And then Quad spoke up and was like, I agree too. You know, I just don't like, you know, somebody shouldn't feel, you know, devalued or unheard just because they're trying to tell you something. You know, that person should really be supported and not shunned for trying to speak up. And Andy, of course, asked the question that everybody knew the answer to. Oh, are you talking about Gregory? She said, mm-hmm. And so, of course, Sweet Tea was like, why are you always talking about him? Like, you so worried about him. And Quad was like, girl. And he was like, I don't think that's what it was. Because in this moment, god dang, Sweet Tea, bitch, she really was like on your side, low key. She really was just letting you know, like, girl, we see each other. Like, girl, I've been with it. I know what he's like. And so the fact that we watched what we watched on national television, that man sit there, who you talking to? Who you think you talking to? Like, what? Excuse me, you ain't my daddy. But Sweet Tea, of course, you know, has to fight Quad, I think, in order to appease Gregg. She knows just being cordial with Quad, immediately, Gregg is one of those people where it's like, if you ain't for me, you against me. And it's like, just because I'm not for you doesn't mean I'm against you type situation. And he'll automatically take Sweet Tea being cool with Quad as disrespect to him, because he resents the fact that Quad got out of that marriage left with something done improved, and he left with nothing. Not a baby, not an iota, right? He's feeling scammed, or, he feeling like out of the deal that they both made with each other, i.e., you're the older rich man or the older man that's providing, you're the youth that's pretty and supposed to be, my house and home keeper and barefoot and pregnant with a baby. And Quad left the divorce, moved on, and, bossed on up. And Gregg's still sitting there, with nothing to show for it. So he's definitely, a lot of his resentment towards Quad, I think, has to do with that. He feels like in the game of them playing each other, she just played him a little bit better. But yeah, so when she said that, she was like, girl, ain't nobody worried about you. Understand, like, I gave you my scraps. Like, I let you have him. You did all of this, basically, you getting all soil up on your chest, player, and you upset at me. How could I put it? She said, girl, I let you have him. You have to crawl in his DMs and promise him a baby. What she say? You have to crawl in his DMs a lot and tell him that you gonna give him a baby, and you still ain't made good on that promise.
Oh, damn.
Clocking.
When I tell you, everybody's face had the same reaction. Everybody was thinking like, God dang, okay, all right, there we go, we going that way. But I'm not gonna lie, y'all. Had this been in another situation, other people would have dug into what Quad said about Sweet Tea, because we were here with Jackie and Buffy, talking about the fertility of a woman, and so with Quad saying that, she's what Nene said, she's basically trying to, girl, like, girl, you got powdered eggs over there, and so you sat there and tried to make a promise to a man, and you still ain't made good on it, like, damn. And all the only thing she could do was like flip her off and be like, girl, whatever, like, it's Sweet Tea, if you're gonna be here, baby, you gotta be quick on your feet, okay? So all she had for her was like, girl, F you, flipped her off, and then they kind of like moved on from there. And so after that, I think they get into the whole Sweet Tea and Heavenly of it all, okay? Because we know when they started the season, or when Sweet Tea got here, her and Heavenly, it was a lot, all right? They was beefing back and forth with each other, which obviously was a big, shift for Sweet Tea, because we all know Heavenly was the one who befriended her ass when she first got on the show. So to watch these ladies definitely flip the script on Sweet Tea, I don't like, and it's very fugazi and fake. But god dang it, who's calling me? Always want to call me when I'm trying to do something. All right, y'all, I'm back. So picking up where we left off, I think we're getting into Sweet Tea and Heavenly. So y'all know Sweet Tea and Heavenly definitely have had their back and forths on the show ever since she came on. And now that the script is flipped, these two are going back and forth. So now we got Andy bringing up, well, Heavenly, you said that that Dr. G wasn't respected in the medical community. And she was like, I did, but I just must preface that only came after she said, something about, me in the medical community, okay? And so then they bring up the fact that somebody brought up Jackie. Well, Jackie, how dare you sit by and let your friend, attack somebody's fertility, especially after she did to Buffy, and all Jackie said was, I didn't want to get nothing on me. Jackie has mastered the art of sitting back, shutting the fuck up, and letting Heavenly talk herself until she puts her foot in the mouth. Jackie is always okay with Heavenly saying some and speaking on her behalf, even when it's wrong, okay? And so Jackie also as well, because she's already had the heat of having to deal with, her situation with, getting the backlash, and everything. She ain't want none of it. She ain't want none of that at all. So then of course, they speak about Heavenly, saying, well, because she was like, Heavenly's like, I didn't attack her fertility. People thought, well, yeah, you did. You said that she wasn't gonna have a chance to hell to get pregnant, basically. And then Heavenly had to be like, but of course, wait a minute, that was a reaction. She said, your mother's in hell. And so I told her, girl, my mama in hell got a better chance of having a baby than you. These women was going back and forth, okay? But at this point, it's given like a little bit of truce, okay? As Heavenly basically was like, I've apologized for, the doctor comment or whatever, but, at this point, it's whatever. And we all know Heavenly sometimes just apologizes to get shit over with, and she don't really mean it. But Andy at least got her to try and say something nice about Sweet Tea. And she basically said, well, I do respect the fact that she came here today because, other people did it. And so Sweet Tea was like, fine, then I'll receive that. So then Quad, they got to get into Quad, how she was acting up, okay, at the, the trip, because Sweet Tea, is coming on this trip. How is she going to be with Quad? She basically said, I didn't want any issues with Quad. I felt like, we were cordial, we were copacetic. But then we get to this trip and basically all that should go out the window. And of course, with the playback, we see what happened. Quad was drunk and letting everybody know, my man. Okay, that's what she was doing. And so, Simone kind of speaks up and was like, well, she was gloating at first about her relationship, but then, somehow it turned to them. And so, Quad basically was like, yeah, I love my man King. Shoot, I shot it from the rooftop. Let everybody in their mama know. Bitch, I got my man, okay? And so she was like, that's all that was. And then so she kind of really reiterated the main point of her kind of turning to them and being like, oh, I think that y'all are the perfect match for each other is because she's like, I know people are going to make this a thing, and so Sweet Tea's already having to deal with the fact that she said, they're comparing us, the comparisons are like, getting old, talking about being her. And I mean, Sweet Tea, you got on a show being like, to think that you weren't, like, you were aware that people were going to compare. You were aware of that. But you thought because you was the new woman and you was with Gregg and Gregg has already filled your head full of stuff of how you're just so much better than Quad. Everybody else was watching and hell, the dudes was like, Letitia seems like such a good fit for Gregg. You were okay with the comparisons when you felt like you was, up here with him. And then now the role has reversed. All these ladies is stabbing you in the back. And now all of a sudden it's, you don't want the comparisons. But Quad let it be known, girl, ain't nobody worried about you. I ain't comparing. But you can't compete where there's no, what she say? She said, you can't compete where you don't compare. That's what it was. And so Sweet Tea was like, girl, who wants to be you? Nobody wants to be you or whatever. What you got? 2 failed businesses, nothing but failed businesses. I say, hey, say what you want about Sweet Tea. But at least she has something in the chamber. I give her, a point for that. And then Heavenly was like, girl, she was like, and she called her a drunk too. She was like, oh yeah, Quad was like, yeah, she called me a drunk. And she was like, cause you drunk. And then you was at the vacation drunk, girl. And she was like, girl, you wish I was. She's like, you want me to be a drunk. She was like, girl, you had 2 DUIs. I said, hey, say what you want. But point 2 for Sweet Tea, I just wish she had, kept her foot on her neck. Cause if everybody was like, oh, because she's like, like, girl, you are an alcoholic. And of course, all the other ladies, especially Heavenly, was caping for Quiet. You can't say nothing like that. That's so disparaging. And so Andy's like, you want to call her an alcoholic? She's like, well, let me not say that. But it's clear that she has a problem with drinking. We've seen her drunk on the show. And the thing is, Quiet, bitch, 2 DUIs. It's starting to explain why your ass wasn't on the show a couple of them years, okay? If you had 2 DUIs, and say what you want. Had I been Sweet Tea and they were talking about, you want to call her an alcoholic, I would have looked at Andy and said, 2 is half than 4, Andy. You got another Bravo celebrity that got 4. You want Quad to reach that? So I think we better address it now while she only got 2. Or is she going to be the next one, pleading non-contest and become an inmate 967-000. Shout out to Rodney. Okay? And the Sweet Tea should have just kept her foot on her neck when it came to that. But yeah, like for sure, I was kind of like, okay, Sweet Tea, when she came back at her about the businesses and you know the DUIs, because that definitely was information that was brought up in the past that ain't nobody really get a chance to really dig into like that. But heavily like was capable for Sweet Tea heavily. Okay. So after that, I think we get Mimi on the stage. After the ladies talk about, of course, what's going on with the current administration doing everything they can to come after women's bodies. Of course, when Jackie talk, all I can do is just roll my eyes. Cause girl, we know how you really think low key. And so the thing is so crazy too, because Jackie, even if you did think that, it was a bunch of women coming to you saying, oh, just using it as an excuse to get off work. So what? So what? What they got to do with you? What they got to do with you? View it as reparations. It's working for these white people. Let the black women sit home and get paid for it. Like, what? And the fact that I was like, so what if they were? Like, I just, it's something about Jackie that just really just chaps my ass. And so of course after that they got into the mother-in-law stitch or whatever, and Quad's supposed to have one. She's like, don't worry, you gonna get one. And Contessa says she pushed out a 10-pound baby. My brother, when he was born, was damn near 10 pounds. He was a big ass baby, but now he's tall and lanky. The irony. But so she's like, shoot, I know I might have had something, because I'm still tight tight and right, okay. And it's just like, and he's like, why is it called the mother-in-law stitch? And he's like, because it's for the son. Of course, back in the day, y'all should hear about the stories of women talking about, not wanting it, but then doctors still putting it in anyway. The Reddit stories of birth and everything like that. And y'all have no idea. Medical malpractice when it comes to women is so ingrained in history, but that's another conversation for another day. All right. So we got, the men showing up in the back. We got Mimi showing up. Gregg, come to find out, he's realizing, oh shoot, where all the men at? Producers had to come and let him know, hey, just to let you know, because we're gonna take some precautions because of things that have happened since the last time, you saw each other. So he's realizing, oh, so shoot, I'm down here by myself while all the men upstairs sitting there with King. I know Gregg feels some type of way. I know he do. So they bring Mimi on. Mimi looked really nice. And so of course Andy asked her about coming into the group and what did she, think about it. She was like, that not everybody's crazy, okay? Everybody's not crazy. And so he asked her, when you got introduced to Jackie or whatever, who did she say that you should go talk to first? And immediately Heavenly laughed, because we all know Heavenly needs some work, okay? Heavenly got some deep-rooted issues that is stuck in her chest and back at home in that windowless room that she was in as a child. I know a lot of pain. That's a pain point for Heavenly, and she really does need to work on it. And it kind of seems like she is, because Mimi was like, yeah, we've been doing some work behind the scenes, and Heavenly's like, yeah, she's giving me some tips on parenting and need or whatever. Like, we've been talking behind the scenes, so maybe they've been, kind of conversing and working through Heavenly's, childhood traumas. So then she gets into, trying to help Sweet Tea in the aspect of like, when I came on, Sweet Tea, she's a newlywed, first year married, that's obviously going to be hard. And then not only that, you're doing it on a wide stage and you're having nothing but, comments and people saying whatever, that's going to affect a relationship. And obviously it is, but they signed up for that, Mimi. They signed up to this show expecting a different result. And because they didn't get it, now they try to backpedal and pussy pop and acting, feeling like somebody pissed on their Cheerios. But yeah, so what else happened after that? I think Mimi got to talking about the vacation and Quad kind of going ham. And Andy basically asked her to give kind of a short circuit story or just like a short description of each of the ladies. She called Jackie intentional, conversational. She said Quad, grief, work through it, makes sense. She's got to grieve Gregg and she's got to grieve her niece. Heavenly was spot on. Open up your inner child, heal that. And you could tell Heavenly kind of laughed out of uncomfortableness because it was true. She knew it was. She told Toya was another one she was very valid on. She was like, Toya, you got this. You know, you don't need the validation. You know, and that's something that we've seen Toya do a lot, is searching for that validation, which is why she had a damn thing for her Birkin and like is constantly, you know, trying to move on to the next house. You know, that shit that happened to her in her childhood that she talked about on the first couple of seasons of, you know, people talking about her and what she wore and things like that, you could tell sticks to her to this day. Simone, she called her rigid and she needs to be more flexible. Another one, check, ding, ding, ding. And then with Sweet Tea, she was like, Sweet Tea, you know, you gotta let us know how to help you. You know, you gotta communicate. I.e., all these girls are seeing what's happening to you, Sweet Tea. And they already know what's happening to you because they watched it with somebody else. And so we get it. You're trying to defend Gregg, that's your husband, but you gonna have to talk to us and kind of meet us halfway. All right? It can't just be like just staying firm on this side of Gregg, but not being, you know, malleable, at least flexible to hearing ways that you can meet in the middle with the group and Gregg, you know? So, yeah, after that, Mimi leaves, and then we get all the men coming in, and then the women go and sit down in the back, and now they're watching all the men. You know, all the other men kind of see basically, they feel that, you know, King was justified in his reaction. And right now they are kind of looking at Gregg like, you know, he has a lot of things that he needs to heal from. So all the men come on stage, get introduced. Steven, he came on with his, you know, Twinkle Twinkle Little Star jacket. Cecil, yes, Cecil looked good, y'all. He looked really nice. Of course, Damon, Gregg came on. Ooh, sorry, y'all. That tea giving me indigestion and starting to build up air on me. Let me hurry up and finish this review, okay? My bad, y'all. I'm back. Let me go ahead and get finished with this review. I had to go pee because I got a UTI right now. So the antibiotics, everything, you know, when you got a UTI, you got to continuously have to go to the bathroom. But back to it. Like I said, we're ending with the men finally coming out, right? And so the men are coming out, and then the women are backstage, actually literally sitting around each other and discussing what they're watching on the screen. So, of course, we got to get into, you know, Gregg and King. Andy did the one thing I hate that you motherfuckers keep doing. Andy and Carlos King is bad about this shit too. Andy was like, well, you know, this is the first time y'all seen each other since the, you know, incident, but I've heard things have kind of been like, okay, so, you know, could we possibly start on a good note with a handshake? No, like, that pisses me off. And then Carlos always does that shit on the reunions where he's like, do you think could we get a hug from the both of you? No, like, Carlos does that shit all the time, and it pisses me off when y'all do that. Like, stop it. Y'all be trying to force stuff so bad. Like, leave it the fuck alone. And so they didn't handshake, and so Gregg was like, well, you know, I've been hearing from the guys, you know, I mean, good things from King. So, you know, I'm just trying to wonder, you know, how did we end up in this situation? Like, what was your problem? And King was like, well, first off, I didn't have no problem with you. I had a problem with the disrespect. And in this moment right now, you know, I'm kind of having a problem with the lack of accountability, because this was a mano-a-mano situation, Gregg. This was a mano-a-mano situation. And so, of course, heavily messy ass in the back. That's right. Just a bitch. He a bitch ass nigga. Like, and so Sweet Tea's over there like, girl, you a one trick pony. She was like, girl, hush. Your husband a bitch, you know. And so then we got to get into the Gregg and Damon of it all. And this is where we're going to get into Damon a little bit, because I've been having my little 2 cents to say about Damon, and I got shit to say about it now. So, of course, they bring up the beefage between, you know, G and Heavenly and how that made it to social media, and, you know, the rumors with Damon. And Damon basically was like, you know, this is just I just, this is just bullshit. I don't really cuss, but that's how serious I am. We're sitting here talking about my character. You've known me for all these years and you just sat there like a coward because this was last season when he asked him, do you think I cheat? Do you think I'm a cheater? And Gregg just kind of sat there like, what you want me to say? And Damon, if there's something that we know to be true about you men, is y'all are very much aware of the bullshit that all of y'all can be doing in a group because men know themselves what they're doing at home. So Gregg can't speak for your character outside of the medical aspect. He can't speak towards your character towards your marriage because he don't know what you do outside of that. So for you to sit there and ask him like, well, do you think I cheat? Am I a cheater? Like he can't be like, yeah, I know for sure you ain't. Because if some shit pop out that you was over there dicking somebody down across the street from the house, he gonna be looking stupid. And then people gonna call him an accessory because he was making it seem like he was lying on your behalf. But Gregg in good conscience can't sit there and speak up for you like, oh yeah, he ain't a cheater. Because if you recall, Gregg's ass when he was with Quad was with his homie and two girls at the hotel. Right? So Damon was just like, he was blowing me with that. So, he, doing his bass in his voice, how dare you, you know me with the character and heavily in the back. Right. He just don't know how to take accountability. Just a bitch. And of course, Sweet T's like, oh girl, whatever. And then, Toya speak up and was like, this true, Sweet T. Like, you just need to learn to listen. That's the problem in your household. Ain't nobody talking. The only person talking is him. And I really just like Simone and Toya this season, and really the end, just had me looking at them with my good eye because damn, Toya, you were the one that was all for Sweet T and you done flipped on her like that. So then I'm glad Cecil ended up speaking up for Gregg in the aspect against Damon because he was like, well, nah, because Damon, he could kind of say that about you. Heavily was sitting there talking about him and talking about his, medical character and things like that, and you didn't say nothing. Like, that speaks for the same. And he was like, well, no, like, this is my character. You've known me for 10 years. Like, so, and like Damon really kind of like sidestepped the analogy, the comparison, because they very much are the same. You want him to speak for your character in the medical community, your character outside of it in your personal life. It's still character at the basis of the principle of what he's asking. So if you think he's a good man, he's a good guy, then you would be able to vouch for him in the medical community. And this is another one of those situations where Heavenly's always running her fucking mouth. And Damon, you just not saying nothing. But then you got mad at Gregg talking about, oh, my issue was that you were running to the other man and you didn't bring it to me. Yeah, he did on the season. He came to you, said that he was upset about what Heavenly, and you told him he was being sensitive. You basically said he was being a bitch about it. So that Cecil and Eugene were like, well, had Sweet Tea said something about you in the medical community, you would have been pissed off. Absolutely, you would have been mad. You want to sit there and say, no, that doesn't matter to me. What matters to me, is about, my character as me, as a person, an individual. It's the same shit, Damon. So to be sitting there acting like you wouldn't care if Sweet Tea attacked your medical practice is a bold-faced lie. Just like you called him a liar. So he starts bringing up how Gregg is a liar with the fact that after Heavenly called him a pedophile, Eugene brought it up. He's like, here's the main thing that we're missing because, these attacks are what affect people's practice and how you make money. And so Damon really had the nerve to sit there and say, well, that's, what's bad is calling me a cheater. And he was like, she called him a pedophile. Like, I think that kind of like knocks that out, sir. And it absolutely does. And so finally Damon spit it out his mouth. I'm not saying that it wasn't wrong. Like, she should have said that. Finally, you can finally say that. That's what you should have said during the season. But you called him sensitive. So I just didn't like that Damon was really like sidestepping and really just like not addressing like the crux of it. So then as that's happening, in the back, Heavenly was like, because Sweet Tea said something, So Heavenly was like, yeah, you know, he can't speak to Gregg's character. Shoot, we can, girl. And Sweet Tea was talking like, telling her to. She was like, girl, don't tell me shush. I know Gregg's history. You might want to be quiet because we know who he was in the hotel with. Like, of course, Heavenly doing her shit, right? Girl, we know who he was in the hotel with. You might want to stop talking because I know stuff. Like, you might want to stop talking before I hurt your feelings, little girl.
Shut your bitch ass up before I get to talking shit about you.
That's really what it was giving. Shit. Well, it went from that to Heavenly and Sweet Tea to now Simone and what's her name? Quad. So now Simone and Quad kind of end up getting into it at the end after Gregg and Damon sort of kind of make up. Because Damon basically was like, you know, if I didn't defend you, that made you feel some type of way, you know, whatever, I feel you. So then it was like, when they were talking about how, oh, you know, Quad was bigging up King, it had nothing to do with that. And Quad's like, it had nothing to do with that, you know, because Curtis was like, you know, shoot, Quad had to sit back and watch, you know, for a whole season, you know, what's his name? Gregg big up Letitia and say how much, you know, she was a better woman. And so Quad was like, you know, that wasn't, you know, I had no problem with that. That didn't bother me. That wasn't my problem. What my problem was when you ushered these bitches back in, you know, that was so wrong. You used these people. Here goes Simone. You gave us your ass to kiss. You know, that's her favorite thing to say. You gave us your ass to kiss. So we went and hung around with Gregg. We can usher whoever we want to. If we can with them, we can usher them in. And so when I tell you it became a screaming battle, we can usher them in. Girl, you. And she said, girl, you. She said, I said it first. And she was like, you gave us your ass to kiss. You don't care about nobody. She said, you dirty bitch. And when she said it, I was like, ooh, you dirty bitch. And so then she was like, you talking about me? Girl, I was with you knocking on the doors looking for your daddy. And Simone shot off when she heard that. Girl, that was in front of the cameras. That was in front of the cameras. And then that's where the episode ended. So yeah, you guys, hopefully this wasn't too long. We had another good, this has actually been a pretty decent reunion. And next week is when it concludes. Y'all drop down in the comments. Do you guys feel like Simone and Toya are switching up on, you know, the whole operation that they had with Sweet Tea and kind of low-key doing her wrong? Do you guys believe that Damon had a right to hold Gregg to the standard of speaking on his character? Okay. And I think that's it. I'll catch y'all hoes later. Deuces.